we don't need salvation for our sins. We need healing for our wounds. So as I talk about this, I'm going to hopefully not get too worked up about the church. It's one thing that sometimes gets me a little bit riled up, but I don't want to focus on blame or what's wrong. I just want to I do want to talk about this idea of sin, though. And this idea that there's something wrong with us. And that idea that there is something inherently wrong with us, it's not limited to Christianity. A lot of the major religions have some kind of idea at their core that there's something wrong with us that we need to fix or overcome. But with the relationship of the church and Western culture, it's really that idea of sin, especially this original sin, this idea that there's something inherently flawed with us, something wrong with us that we need help with, that we need forgiveness for. And that idea is really strongly present in all of Western culture. Whether or not you were raised going to a church, whether or not you've ever been in a church, that idea that there's something inherently wrong with us is still deeply ingrained in our psyche in the Western culture. And I'm not trying to blame the church. I'm not trying to place blame or point a finger, but I just want to make everyone aware and realize that underneath all of that, at the core of our psyche, the core of our identity, has been planted this seed that there's something wrong with us. And most of us don't realize because we take it for granted because it's in there so deeply in everything that we learn about ourselves. And this idea that there's something wrong with us, it expresses itself in many different ways in different people. For some people, it can be this idea, it can lead to people-pleasing activities where we're always trying to bend ourselves to fit other people's expectations. We're always trying to achieve more, to win praise from our parents or our school teachers or from employers. This idea that we're not enough, or that we're too much, or that we've done something wrong, we're not wanted. And it can also come out in the opposite. Lots of people who are kind of egotistical, or people who seem really overly full in themselves and overly prideful, lots of times the root of that is they're trying to convince themselves that there's not something wrong with them. And it comes out through this overcompensation and trying to, by trying to convince others of how wonderful they are, they're really trying to convince themselves. And so even that seemingly opposite behavior can still be an expression of this idea that there's something deeply wrong with us. And in the church and Christianity, our only hope for dealing with this wrongness of ourselves is by begging for salvation, begging for mercy, begging for forgiveness from God or from a higher power. And it creates this really damaging idea about ourselves, that we're helpless, that we're powerless, that the only thing we can do is pray for forgiveness, pray for salvation. But of course, if we deep down inside, we believe we're not worthy of it, then we're never going to receive that salvation because we don't think we deserve it. And so it just creates this continuous cycle of suffering and feeling we're not worthy and believing we're not worthy. And if we think that our only hope for salvation comes from outside of us, but we're not worthy of it, then we never allow that salvation to come into our lives. But it doesn't have to be like this. We don't have to hold on to these ideas that there's something inherently wrong with us. Sometimes this feels true because we feel a pain deep inside us. We feel a hole, we feel a void in our soul. We feel like there's something missing. We feel like there's something we need. And that's not some kind of an original sin. That's our unresolved childhood core emotional wounds. And so rather than praying to some higher power to save us, we have the power, we have our within us, the ability within us to ease our own suffering by giving love to those wounds, those core emotional wounds that make us feel like we're less than, those wounds that make us feel like we're bad, like we're not enough, that we've, or that we're too much, or that we're unwanted, or that no matter what, we're just wrong. We ourselves can start to heal those wounds. We can be our own salvation. We can bring the end to our own suffering by healing those wounds, by giving ourselves love, and by coming together in groups like this and giving each other love and telling each other that there's nothing wrong with us. And when we come together in groups like this, we can remind ourselves that we don't have to believe in that ingrained cultural idea that there's something inherently wrong with us. We can remind ourselves that there's nothing wrong with us, that we're just wounded. We just need to love ourselves. We just need to love each other. We just need to start to heal these deep core wounds so that we can feel whole, so that we can feel like there's nothing wrong with us. We can feel like we belong here. We can feel like we deserve to be here. So yeah, I think that's about all I have to say about that. Does anybody have any questions or comments or anything you'd like to add to that idea?